So hi and welcome to the first edition of Anecdotally for 2019. The story that I'm going to share is from a movie, and it's an example of how you can use stories from movies to help make a business point. The movie in question is the 2016 movie by Theodore Melfi titled Hidden Figures. And there's a number of storylines through the movie. This is one of them. The context is that NASA are engaged in the space race. It's the early 1960s and America and Russia are trying to get spaceships into orbit, circle the Earth, return them safely. And NASA have a research center, the Langley Research Center, and there's a bunch of African-American women, a team of African-American women who are mathematical geniuses. And their job is to perform the mathematical calculations in order to calculate re-entry profiles, orbits, speeds, trajectories, that sort of thing. Now, they actually developed some of the mathematics in order to be able to do this, so it was really quite an exciting time. The conditions for this team of African-American women weren't great. They were working in a racially and gender segregated working environment, and the leader of the team, or the unofficial leader of the team, was a lady called Dorothy Vaughan. Middle-aged woman, husband, family, and because she was African-American, she wasn't appointed formally into the supervisor's role. She simply filled that job because somebody needed to do it. Now, everything was going fine until NASA installed an IBM mainframe computer. Now, this is the 1960s. It's the very early days of computing, and so this massive piece of equipment was installed, and pretty much nobody knew what a computer did at that stage. Dorothy saw this and spoke to the IBM technicians and realized that the computer was going to be a disruptor. It was going to perform all the calculations that were currently performed manually by her team. And so Dorothy just kept this to herself, but she set out to find as much as she could out about that computer. She talked to the technicians and she found out that the computer was programmed in a programming language called Fortran. And she went out to the library because she wanted to know a little bit more about Fortran, and she tried to borrow a book from the library on programming in Fortran, but she couldn't because the book was in the whites only section. So she stole it, put it under a jumper, walked out with the book, and she taught herself how to program in Fortran, which is no mean feat, because I remember learning to program in COBOL back in the 1980s, and doing it without guidance, without somebody, without expert tuition, was really difficult. So she did it. She became competent in programming in Fortran. She practiced on that IBM mainframe machine after hours, and she began teaching her team, and her team, by the way, they were called computers. They were human computers who did the calculations. So she was teaching her team how to program in Fortran. Eventually, NASA realized that to get the value out of the IBM mainframe, they needed a programming team, and that programming team needed to be able to code in Fortran, and they didn't have that team. But then Dorothy, of course, put up her hand and said, yes, we can all program in Fortran. And Dorothy became the supervisor of NASA's first programming team, and 30 of her team became part of that first programming team.